Hi, my name is Robert Guillen, and this video is for the Grand Canyon University Master's Program for Curriculum Design and Instruction. And today, this video will be covering our assignment on curriculum design models within our department. So, for me, being that I've been a teacher for 13 years at Yucaipa High School, I believe there are several ways in which, as teachers, we can deliver curriculum to students. Um, in high school based on their strengths and weaknesses. It's been in my experience that the utilization or the preferred utilization is a learner-centered approach to education. It's been what's most effective in my classroom, and if I had to go to my history or my social studies department and look to change what it is that we do, this would be the teaching style in which I would prefer. There are many reasons in which I would. The primary one is that it's a student-centered, focused model for learning, and it allows us as instructors to meet the individual needs of our students based on their strengths and weaknesses. The concept that educating students is constructed by students in conjunction with learner-based education is something that been a big proprietor of. I believe this type of approach allows us to identify and work with our students, again, based on the things that they do well, and then at the same time work on those things that they do not. Again, as a history teacher within my department, it's been in my experience, both as an educator and as a student in school, that we tend to stick to more of a traditional direct instruction model for informing and educating our students, which, looking back, although it worked for me, it may not have worked for everybody else. As a current educator, I've realized that is the case. It doesn't work for every single student that I have in my classroom. Therefore, as a result, I need to be able to provide a more enriched learning experience and create situations in history in which are outside of the traditional norms or traditional means of instruction. So it's one thing to show students, for example, the various conditions, environments, sights and sounds of world conflicts such as World War I, specifically trench warfare as an example. It's another thing to take the time in the classroom to really get them to understand, again, the environment based off sights and sounds, flipping desks, grabbing fog machines, using strobe lights to really get my students actively engaged in this type of lesson plan. And again, I feel a learner-based, student-based style of curriculum allows me to do that because it's, in my opinion, education that's outside of the textbook. Although there would have been students that could equally and as effectively obtain an education and mastery of whatever state standard, in this case 11.6, through the use of a textbook, direct instruction, PowerPoint, Prezi presentation, the wide variety of the simple I talk, you listen, and through passive observation, you're going to learn. But for me, it's about offering, again, a multitude of ways for students to learn. So I feel like a learner-based curriculum within my department is a type of curriculum model that gives students the feel that they have an active role in their education and their learning, because we are focusing on their interests in conjunction with those standards that we have to get them to understand. But because we're focusing on those interests and looking at their strengths and incorporating that into the curriculum, should lead into more of an active engagement and therefore increased participation within the class. In a subject such as history, it's important to have real-life application, examples that keep students engaged and interested. And I feel like this type of approach allows us to do so. In simple terms, as an educator, being able to show my students or show our students that history has a major tendency to repeat itself would definitely be a good starting point in terms of getting students to understand the importance of learning history. Within the curriculum of this learner-based approach, I would also encourage the use of a constructivist approach. Constructivism is the practice in which students are able to get a more hands-on experience with their own education with materials or supplemental materials that we provide to them as an instructor. Students get to learn through social interaction, through the use of these supplemental materials, but at the same time, in conjunction with their fellow students, and this helps create more of that motivation and goal setting at the same time. This idea that discovery and objective-based learning has always been a preference for mine, and so if I was employing this within my own department, I would argue that it gives students the opportunity to really control their learning experience and overall outcome based on the use of their memory and scaffolding that they would have picked up in our other type of learning styles such as behaviorism and cognitivism. So it's not that passive education and learning isn't a good thing. It's been one of the mainstays in which we've educated students for generations. I just feel as if, again, if we were changing what our departments do, that we would need to incorporate more of an active style of learning, one that incorporates the curriculum that not only looks at what our students do well, but also looks at what they don't do well and figure out ways in which we can help strengthen those so when they do move on to the next class or their next educational institution, those things are no longer a major deficiency for them. But as a teacher, the ability to provide students with supplemental materials and to support them in an effort to further their education is a concept I would really feel like would benefit any department, not just a social studies or history department. The importance of total inclusion in a teacher's classroom when we design our curriculum is something that we want to look at and make sure it's an equal and opportunistic learning environment for all of our students. That's our job as an educator. It should be one of our primary goals as a teacher, and as a result, it is up to us to be as knowledgeable as possible in a multitude of different approaches to developing curriculum in our classroom. For this specific example, again, I would lean more towards a learner-based curriculum in conjunction with constructivism, and then adding behaviorism, cognitivism as well. Because again, it's about making sure that every student in your classroom has an equal opportunistic playing field to learn. So it's not just focusing on the kids who, like myself, would have learned better in an environment which was more hands-on, but also those kids who would learn more effectively in a traditional setting or those that would require something. Whether it's subject-centered, whether it's learner-centered, problem-centered, the goal is to find out what works best for our students and to try to accommodate them in the most effective way possible so that it increases their ability to learn. But I understand that depending on the instructor, what they're comfortable with, what they're not, the subject matter, history versus math, math versus English, English versus science, that one learning style and one curriculum theorem will work better than another. Our job as instructors is to figure out what works for our classroom, what works for our students, and in this particular case in a 56-minute class for each period that we have. And it could change based on period. That being said, we need to also look at not just approaches that are most effective, but again, that differentiation between what our students do well and what our students don't do well in order to increase their understanding, but also their engagement. We need to provide them with various opportunities to learn both on their own and with others, including ourselves, but in small groups in conjunction with their classmates as well. But depending on the type of assignment or the assessment that we're looking at for that unit as well, we may switch around the type of learning theorems or strategies that we use, again, to match the needs of each individual period. In one class, I might have a majority of students who are more subject-centered, and another one, they might be more learner-centered, and others may prefer constructivism versus behaviorism versus, social interaction. It's just really, it's our job as an educator to figure that out. I generally implement some aspects of all three if we're talking learner versus centered versus problem-based. But when it all comes down to it, we're talking to our departments to determine whether or not one component of a model works versus another. Again, I go back to the idea that each instructor has to figure out what works best for their individual classroom. And so whether it's taking a look at theories that come from Frisk or theories that come from any of the other various educators and psychologists that we've adapted learning theories from, again, it comes down to what's going to put your students in the best potential possible in order to succeed, not only in your class, but any other classes they may be taking. So again, I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this video, and hopefully